Got a call at about 4 a.m. Typical car wreck in rural area. Respond and find car hit light pole and no one around. Figure it's a drunken start, walking around the area trying to find where he's hiding. 1. House in the area across the street and about 150 yards away. After a couple of minutes, a woman comes screaming bloody murder from the house towards my unit, full sprint screaming at the top of her lungs. I shine my flashlight on her so she knows where I am because she's just running towards my car. She sees me and runs straight up to me. I'm trying to calm her down, make sure she's not injured and all that good stuff. She tells me it's her car. Okay, getting somewhere. But she wasn't driving. Here we go. Let me guess, somebody stole it. Nope. She told her husband she was leaving him. He freaks out and says he's going to kill himself. She says he downed a bottle of aspirin and no clue if this was true or not. When that didn't work, he jumped in the car and drove into the light pole trying to kill himself. When that didn't work, he ran back over to the house and they argued some more. Sees me pull up, makes her leave and locks all the doors. I asked her why she didn't leave and was he being violent towards her. No, he would never hurt her. She said, but he grabbed like a 12-inch butcher knife from the kitchen and told her she needed to go, so she did. Once he locked the door, she panicked because the children were inside. Don't remember the ages, but very young. Cue the screaming and running. I look over to the house and began to see the interior lights going off one by one. Well, shit. I hurry up and jump in my car and drive over. Fellow cop pulls up. Quickly fill them in. Armed suicidal male with kids inside. House is dead quiet. We begin stalking around in the darkness, trying to peek in windows to assess the situation. As we get to the back door, we hear a noise, and my buddy swings his light up and we see him in the backyard behind us. Freaking guy was outside the entire time watching us. He's sitting on his feet, half sitting up, is the best way I can describe it. Tats all over him, no shirt on with jeans. His head is cocked to the side, and he's just staring at us with that giant ass knife in his hand and not saying a word. We both draw, but keep our guns by our sides. He's about 20 feet away. Start talking to him, but no response. Then all of a sudden, without saying a word, he begins cutting. I mean full-on slicing his forearms and chest. Then he begins screaming and crying. We're telling him to stop. Just talk to us. You're not in trouble. We'll get you help. He says he deserves to die. Well, I'm not killing him, and my buddy's not either. He switched hands and started slicing the other forearm. Just deep, terrible cuts, and he won't stop. He starts slicing his thighs, chest, and even his neck a little. We already called for the ambulance. He finally stood up and was begging for us to kill him. We kind of danced around a little one, not allowing him to position himself to become a threat to us. Yes, I know about the reactionary gap, and I wasn't worried about it. He was losing blood and getting weak, so we basically decided to wait him out. He cut a few more times, and he walked around a bit, and then just fell down. We pounced and got the knife away, and the ambulance showed up. Got him to Docs advised it took 250 stitches to patch him up. No charges, and we got him referred for some help. The kids were unharmed, by the way. He sent her away because he wanted to die and didn't want her to see it. No shit. I pulled that guy over about 3 months later on a random traffic stop, and when he saw me, he just burst into tears and gave me a big old hug. Wife and kids were in the car, and they were making it one day at a time. Said he got some help and was in a dark place that night. Ever been thanked for not shooting someone? Yep, it's just as weird as it sounds. Not a cop, but an EMT. The creepiest call I've ever been on was one at about 3 a.m. Earlier in the night, a call went out for a 20-minute traumatic cardiac arrest. The kid was in a drive-by shooting and died shortly after dead by the time he got to the hospital. Now, I didn't go on that call, some coworkers did. But a few hours after that call, we get a call from the hospital that the kid was brought to, and they tell us we need to go pick up his mother from the nursing home so she can come down and identify the body, and they can break the news to her. I already had a pit in my stomach before we even got into the truck, but on the drive there, it had a very unsettling ambiance. And at that time in the night, the roads are very quiet, and my partner and I were also very quiet. We got to the nursing home, and we explained the situation to one of the aides quietly and went up to the mother's room. We had to wake her and tell her that her son had been in an accident, and we were going to bring her to the hospital that he was at. We were told specifically not to tell her that her son was gone, and we didn't want to be the ones to do that anyway. This little old lady was very sweet, bilateral roll-over limp amputee, so we got her up on our stretcher and brought her wheelchair with us. She was a very sweet woman, thanking us, but also expressing her concern and kept asking us if we knew anything. We had to tell her no, we didn't, and every time we delivered the same answer, I could see the worry in her eyes get a little bit worse. The drive over to the hospital was only about 20 minutes, but it felt like forever. I sat in the back with her. It was the same unsettling ambiance, but this time with an old lady questioning over and over if her son was okay, and me saying over and over that we would all find that out at the hospital, but I sure hoped he was. I could tell she knew something was wrong. It was almost like I could see the panic in her eyes, and I still remember looking out the back through the fog and looking back at her and seeing those terrified, panicked eyes. When we got to the hospital, all of the staff were very accommodating to her as soon as we walked in. Rushed to open the door before we even type in the code. Rushed to get her a wheelchair. Very cautious with their words. I could see her gripping onto the arms of the wheelchair really tightly after we transferred her over. And that look of panic just getting worse as more people came to her with coddling tones. One of the ER physicians came out and kindly told her they were going to go into a more private room so they could talk. I heard her do a little gasp, but she didn't say anything. At this point, I knew that she knew. He brought her into the family room, and my partner and I went into the EMS room, which was directly across from it. Maybe 10 seconds after we closed the door, we hear her screaming no over and over through her sobs. I can't even accurately describe how devastating her sobbing was. It was gutter-ruined pleading, and she was gasping between them. I cried too, until we absolutely had to leave. But I remember when we did leave, the door to the family room was open, and I caught a glance at her face. Red and puffy hand in agony. Still one of the most vivid memories I have today. Got a call at about 9 p.m. referencing a suicide. Nice little neighborhood starter homes. Arrived to find a young, 20-something-year-old wife with a month-old baby crying uncontrollably in the driveway. She explains that her husband had been recently fired from his nursing job for stealing pills and was depressed. She needed formula and had to run to the store. He asked her if she could take the baby. Baby was sleeping, kind of argued. He just asked if he could be alone for a few minutes while she ran the errand. She relented, came home, and found him dead. I tell her to stay outside and head in. Your mind in those situations hear every little thing, and silence is literally deafening. She didn't tell me how we committed suicide, but the second I walked in, and I knew. As soon as I entered and closed the door behind me, I could hear the creaking of a rope swinging back and forth. With no TVs on or any other background noise, it was the creepiest sound ever. Because I could hear it, but I didn't see him. I slowly broke the plane of the laundry room door where the noise was coming from and first saw a foot moving back and forth. I kept going until I saw all of them. He was clearly gone. She tried to pick him up off the road but couldn't and just ran out the house and called 911. I stopped him from swinging, and once backup arrived, we cut him down. I have a second one. Again, I'm not a cop anymore, and this happened many years ago. Got a call at around 1 a.m. from a frantic old man who woke up to pee, and his wife was not in the bed. He explains that she has cancer and had been refusing treatment. This guy was a wreck, been married over 50 years, thought the worst. We start looking around the house, and he comes out of a room and tells me that his .38 revolver is missing and is in full panic mode. We clear the house and head outside to his 30-acre property. It is deathly quiet outside, typical country lot, only about 2 acres cleared with the rest wooded. I'm talking to him, trying to calm him down and looking around at the same time. With the moonlight, I could begin to make out the shadow of what looked like a woman in a nightgown at the entry to the woods. She was just standing there, not moving, but I couldn't tell what she was doing other than watching us. He was positioned so that his back was facing her right, about the time a gunshot rang out, and in the flash saw the outline of her face. I don't know why, but it was just so creepy. I couldn't really make out what she looked like, but the flash of illumination in that shadow was eerie. In an instant, I saw the shadow fall. The look on his face when he realized what that meant was one of a heart literally breaking, and he fell to the ground and began sobbing. I raced over to where she fell and found her dead. After realizing there was nothing I could do but go back and try and comfort him, that's what I did. Never got the whole story of how bad the cancer was. Can only guess she didn't want to do it in their family home. God, I have so many terrible stories like this. I'm so glad I got out of that profession. I'm not a police officer, however, both of my parents are. My mother has a tendency to get a lot of freakish calls. The little bit of backstory to this story. My mom worked in a small town whose mayor lived with his wife, children, and mother-in-law in a house in the center of town. I guess the mother-in-law got into a bit of weird activity and started playing with a Ouija board and went crazy one night and killed the son-in-law in their house, then loaded up the rest of the family into a car, drove down the highway, and crashed the car in attempts to kill the rest of the family. Everyone in the car lived, and despite suffering major injuries that left the mother-in-law's ankles broken, she still managed to take off all her clothes, jump over the median of the highway, and take off into the woods where she hid out until she was kind. The mother-in-law told the police that the Ouija board told her to kill her son-in-law and the rest of the family as well. Anyways, that was before my mom worked for that department, but when she joined, she learned of that story. She drove by that house that was left unoccupied for many, many years and said she just get the chills. Well, one night she said she was patrolling at about 3 a.m, pulled up to that house and saw a girl standing there, emotionless, right in front of the house. My mom gets out and asks her what she's doing there, but the girl was unresponsive. After a while, my mom decides it's best to drive the girl to the local psychiatric ward so she can be examined. My mom doesn't feel threatened by this girl, so she lets her ride in the front seat with her. The psychiatric ward is about 2 hours away from where my mom is, and about 30 minutes into the car ride, the girl turns her head slowly and sharply to my mother, cocks it to the side, and starts growling and speaking in tongues. My mom told me she just thought to herself, "Oh shit, I made a mistake, and now I have 2 options. Get out and try to fight this possibly possessed crazy chick, or floor it." My mom put her arm up and kept a growling girl at bay with a strong hand and floored it. My mom said when she dropped the girl off, she left in a hurry, but later found out she wasn't even from that state, and she had no idea how she got there, but just felt really drawn to that house. I'm not a cop anymore, but I used to be, and this happened over 10 years ago. Got a domestic call at around 3 a.m. Going through a divorce, this wife explains to me that she thinks her soon-to-be ex is trying to scare her. We're standing in our kitchen, which had a wall of windows with no curtains in the breakfast area. It's probably worth mentioning this house was over 100 years old, but very nice, the time. I'm noticing a lot of toys all over the floor around us. Dolls, those little kids scooting, bikes, stuff like that. I asked her why she thinks her husband is trying to scare her. She said they split and she moved into this place a couple of weeks earlier, and this was the 3rd night that she heard something in the kitchen in the middle of the night. This house had a second-story master bedroom, and she went on to explain that all the toys that were currently around me were not out when she went to bed. I'm not religious in the least bit and don't really believe in much of anything, but the second she said that, I got really creeped out to realize that we were not only standing at ground zero, but literally anything or anyone outside the curtainless windows could see every move we made. She would hear noises for a few minutes and would come downstairs to find nothing but toys from the box she kept in the kitchen area all over the place. Well, shit. Now my scared ass had to check the whole damn house because the logical explanation was that someone was messing with her. All windows and doors locked, nothing out of place. Nothing out of the ordinary around the yard either. I started feeling even more creeped out because the house just felt off at that point, like we were being watched, which was totally weird because, again, I've never believed in anything like that. She tells me who her husband is, and I happen to know him vaguely from school way back in the day. I helped her pick up because she was freaked out after calming her down to go see her husband, who lives several miles away. Clearly woke the guy up, and the vehicle is ice cold. Nothing out of the ordinary and talking to him. 2 nights later, I happen to be patrolling his subdivision when the same call comes in. I first drive by his house real quick and bang on the door. He's there. I race over to her house and find the same scenario and story about husband. When I tell her he's home and I just talk to him, she goes white and freaks out a little. She said she didn't want to believe that something or someone was in her house. I had to clear the damn house again, with her holding on to me like we're in a crappy horror film. And again, find nothing. Ever had to find the courage to pull open a 100-year-old door to the attic of some spooky old house waiting for goddamn Jason Voorhees to jump out at you? She's done at this point. Gets a kid, packs a bag, and rolls to her mom's. She moved out a day later when the sun came up. Never figured out what happened, and no issues where she moved. Funny enough, I have some good friends that live there now, and they've never experienced anything like that. And I've been there several times without feeling whatever I felt those 2 nights. I'm not a cop, but I had a somewhere freaky experience when I was a child involving the police, and I imagine that if I had been the officer, I would be sharing the experience from my eyes. My parents divorced when I was really young, and when I was about 8 years old, my mother had reunited with a guy she knew from her high school days 15 or so years earlier. We had dinner with him a few times at his house, and as far as I could tell, he seemed totally ordinary. I can't remember what he did for work, but he came from an affluent family, lived alone in the house he inherited from his parents, was very well-mannered, and he treated us both well. At the time, my mother and I lived in a 3rd-story apartment. Anyway, one night, my mother and I are arriving home late after visiting family, and there were 2 police officers inside the building, just waiting, just outside our apartment door. They told us they were responding to a call from a neighbor who, having heard a noise from outside, stuck their head out the window and reported to have thought to have seen, for a split second, a pair of feet sliding in through one of our apartment windows along the same wall. My mom opened the door for them to go in and search the apartment while we waited just outside the entrance. I remember just standing there at the doorway while holding my mom's hand while we watched both officers cross in and out of view as they entered and exited each room, holding their flashlights up by their heads in one hand and the other hand on their holsters, and repeatedly asking if anyone is there and to come out. After what felt like an eternity, nothing. Finally, the police determined our apartment was empty, with their search ending in the living room at the end of a long hall to the entrance. They put away their flashlights and told us it was safe to enter. As we entered and started walking down the hall towards them, we're a few feet away from the living room entrance when one of the police jolts reaches for his gun and yells at us to get out. All I remember at this point is my mother grabbing me while the cops were screaming orders at someone and a bunch of commotion. It turns out that this friend of my mother was in the apartment after all, and had hidden himself by standing in the narrow space behind a decorative room divider. It was a freestanding, carved wooden divider that was perforated with patterns of small holes. The officer later told us that he only noticed someone was there because from the corner of his eye, he noticed a shining glint of the man's eyeball peeking through one of the holes. They cuffed and arrested him. When they updated my mother later, they informed us that when they interrogated him, they asked what his intention was, and his response was, "I just wanted to smear a little blood on the walls." It still gives me chills thinking about how lucky we were that night. I'm not a cop, but I'm a dispatcher, and I usually send them to the creepy stuff. The best was by far when I kept getting 911 calls from a staticky voice. We kept getting a call from the same number all night and couldn't make anything out. It was a cell phone number, so we had no address, and we couldn't get any info from the cell company. It was coming in with Tower Court in its own way. It was just nonstop static, and every once in a while you'd hear a voice saying, "Hello." It sounded like an older woman, but she never say anything except hello. Finally, at around 2 a.m., after 4 hours of calls from this number, we get Phase 2 coordinates, meaning we can now see a location the number is plotting to. Not only that, but to the woman on the phone can hear us better, and we can hear her. Hooray! She's telling us her heat seems to be off, and she needs it back on. She says, "I'm so cold, please can you help me?" So I respond, "Absolutely, ma'am. We have a deputy on the way." She seems confused about her address, so I read off what I have on the screen, and she says that sounds right. I send a deputy out to check on her and see what we can do to help, and after he gets to the area, he calls in dispatch and says, "You're fucking with me, right? This isn't real." The address was to a cemetery in the middle of nowhere. He drove around, and there were no houses and nothing he could find. He tried calling the woman back, and she wouldn't answer. She didn't call us anymore, and we still couldn't get an address from the cell company. We still talk about that call. We never figured it out and couldn't find anything and could never get her to answer the phone again. It was truly creepy. Got a call about a repeat domestic abuser, a real piece of shit, wife beater. Arrested him several times, would never be a hero when the cops showed up, would give up instantly, of course. Only a tough guy with his 100-pound wife. Anyway, served him with a restraining order after an arrest. No contact with her after he told her he was going to kidnap and kill her for having him arrested. Next night, we get a call from 911. Lady tells us she was on the phone with her friend when her ex broke in the back door. She puts the phone down but doesn't hang up, so her friend is hearing everything and dials 911 from her landline. Dispatcher puts address out. I know it immediately. I'm hauling ass out to the middle of nowhere where they lived. Friend says it got all quiet all of a sudden. Sounds like they left. There was one highway that LED to the next county, and I was on it doing 110. I had another car head to the house, but I knew he was heading for the wine because we all knew what he drove, so he wouldn't hang around town. Sure enough, after driving like a bat out of hell for 10 minutes, I come up behind him. He pulls immediately over and jumps out of the car, yelling at me. I pretty much knew at this point that something was up because Hero was never confrontational. I snatch him up and throw cuffs on him. He lawyers up immediately. Look in the car, no wife. I put him in my car and pop his trunk. She was alive. She was handcuffed behind her back with duct tape over her mouth. Never have I wanted to beat the shit out of a suspect in custody more than in that moment. I got her out and free. She was fine, other than being absolutely petrified. She said that he told her he was taking her where no one would ever find her. Was able to get him 15 years. He's probably out by now, but hopefully she moved on with her life. That's the worst part sometimes. I'm a closure kind of guy, and I usually never find out what happens to the victims after the fact.